Pim van Lommel, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. In your book, Consciousness Beyond Life, the Science of the Near-Death Experience, you describe that you grew up in an academic environment where you were taught that there is a reductionist and a materialistic explanation for everything. And you accepted that until a certain point in your life. What happened? How would you describe your own journey?
Well, I had a medical study, and then I was specialization in cardiology, which is a lot of physics as well. I first doubted if I would study physics or medicine. And also university, but also medical school, so everybody accepted that consciousness is a product of brain function. And I accepted it as well, until I read a book about near-death experiences in 1986 by George Ritchie, Return from Tomorrow, who as a medical student in 1943 had a near-death experience after he died of a double pneumonia. There were no antibiotics available, so he died. He was dead for 9 minutes. And his body was was covered with a sheet. And a nurse there was so upset that this medical student had died that he was able to persuade a medical doctor to give him an injection right into his heart with adrenaline, what was totally uncommon in that time. And after 9 minutes he came back. He had a problem to find his body back because his body was covered with sheets, but he saw his hand with a fraternity ring from a student organization. That's why he knew his body was there. And he had a very extensive near-death experience with all little aspects, positive, negative, etc. When I had read this book, I just started to ask patients who had survived a cardiac arrest in the past if they could remember something from a period of unconsciousness. Because as a cardiologist, I had the privilege to be in contact with patients who survived cardiac arrest. And within 2 years, out of 50 patients, 12 patients told me about the near-death experience, which is a very overwhelming experience, and people are very reluctant to share it with others. But now, at that very moment, my scientific curiosity started to grow. So, in that time, in 1988, I was so intrigued to find a real explanation about the cause and content of a near-death experience, because I didn't believe what was written before. Patients who shared their NDE with me were so reluctant and so overwhelmed and emotional about their experience. They don't try to give a story or something. You feel they're really emotional and honest about the story.
What is a near-death experience, a so-called NDE?
Well, a near-death experience, I call it is the reported memory of a special state of consciousness, usually happening during a critical medical situation like cardiac arrest or coma or near drowning or loss of blood with shock in complicated childbirth, coma by traffic accident or brain damage. And there are universal elements which are told worldwide in all cultures and all times and all religions. Like, first, they are aware of being dead, and they can have the possibility to have perception from above their lifeless body and see what is happening in the cardiopulmonary resuscitation of a surgery. They can come into a black space, but sometimes it's frightening. They see a light where they're attracted to it, where they describe as a tunnel experience. Then they can come in a totally different, unearthly dimension with beautiful landscapes, beautiful colors, beautiful music. They can meet deceased relatives where they recognize and can communicate with. They can meet a being of light or light. And usually with the being of light, they have a life review. They relive their whole life again, where each thought, each word and each act is relived again from early childhood. And also they connect with the consciousness of others in the past. So when you had communication with someone else, you took some plaything from your 5-year-old sister. You know how sad she was. You feel, so you connect with the consciousness of others in the past. Something they have views in the future, flash forward. And then they can come to a border, a mountain or a mist or whatever, and they feel that when they cross this border, they will not come back. And there is a voice or a being of light or deceased relative. They say, you have to go back, it's not your time yet. You've still a task to fulfill. And they come conscious back into the body, which is an awful experience because the body will laugh, like after a traffic accident, a lot of pain and broken bones, etc. Or the pain of a myocardial infarction. So it's an awful experience to come back in your body as well.
What would you say characterizes a deep near-death experience?
So a deep near-death experience is that people report a lot of elements. So not just being out of the body and seeing your own resuscitation, but all the other elements, what I told you, like meeting deceased relatives, a being of light, a live review, live preview, seeing a border, etc. So the more elements are reported, the deeper a near-death experience is encoded.
What triggers a near-death experience?
Well, usually it is a critical medical situation, but not always. So you can have the same kind of experiences in, let's say, a meditation or in isolation. Astronauts have had, Glenn and Mitchell had the same experiences in somewhere close to the moon. Lindbergh had it when he flew over the ocean. Lost in the desert, shipwrecks, all those kind of people can have it. But also without any obvious reason, so just a walk in nature. And the same kind of experience can also be told in the end of life, so in the terminal phase of illness. People can have the same experience, and we call it an end of life experience or a deathbed visions. And they have not all the elements, but quite a lot of near-death experiences as well. And a special thing is that all patients with the near-death experience, have a transformation. They change enormously. They have no fear of death anymore. There's a new insight what is important in life. So unconditional love and empathy, first towards yourself, accept your own negative aspects as well, and then towards other and towards nature, because you feel connected with everybody and with nature, with the planet Earth. And the third thing is enhanced intuitive sensitivity. You feel what others think and feel, etc. So these three after effects are also classical aspects of the near-death experience.
In 2001, you and your fellow researchers published a study on near-death experiences in the renowned medical journal, The Lancet. Would you tell us a bit about that study? How was it conducted? What were the results of the study?
In 1988, we started a prospective study of 344 consecutive survivors of cardiac arrest in 10 Dutch hospitals to see if we could find an explanation for the cause and content of an NDE. Until that time, there have only been retrospective studies, and it is still the largest study ever done about near-death experience in cardiac arrest patients. What we found that 18% of those patients reported a classical near-death experience, and 82% did not have any memory at all about the period of unconsciousness. When we tried to find out what could be the explanation that only 18% of the patients who survived cardiac arrest reported near-death experience, we compared the two groups, with and without a near-death experience. And we found that there was no difference at all in the duration of cardiac arrest, 2 minutes or 8 minutes, or of cardiac arrest, or period of unconsciousness, 5 minutes or 3 weeks in coma. It didn't matter at all. Very short cardiac arrest in the cath lab didn't matter at all. So the severity of the lack of oxygen in the brain didn't play any role if people would have an NDE or not. So we could exclude lack of oxygen in the brain as a possible explanation for the cause and content of a near-death experience. And we also looked at medication. There was no difference between the use of medication in patients with and without a near-death experience. Also, fear of death, psychological explanation was the same. Religion, Christian or atheist, didn't matter at all. Gender, religion, education. So to our surprise, we found no difference at all between the 18% of patients who reported a near-death experience and the 82% who did not report.
Your study attracted worldwide interest. How was it received in scientific and medical circles?
Well, it was totally new, but it is important that it was published in The Lancet, which is one of the most important medical journals in the world. And our study was, the methodology of the study, and the study design was very good. So that was the reason that they were accepted for publication. But the subject, the death experience, was quite new for a lot of people. And so a lot of reluctance as well to accept this kind of studies. There's a huge ignorance in the scientific community and also in the medical community about this kind of experiences, and a lot of prejudice as well.
What kind of proof do you have that near-death experiences are not illusions or hallucinations caused by oxygen deficiency in the brain, as some scientists claim?
Until 2000, a lot of scientists, neuroscientists, thought that it's just hallucination of lack of oxygen. But we could prove, and there have been another 3 prospective studies in cardiac arrest patients as well, who found the same conclusion. There's no medical or physiological or psychological explanation why people can have these experiences. According to the current, still widely accepted material paradigm, where the people think that consciousness is a product of brain function, there would be no conscious experience at all in cardiac arrest, because the brain stops functioning. So what we know when people have a cardiac arrest, they are unconscious within seconds. The body reflexes are gone, which is a function of the cortex of the brain. The brainstem reflexes are gone. The gag reflex, you can put a finger in someone's throat. The corneal reflex or widened pupils don't react to light are clinical findings in those patients. The breathing center close to the brainstem stops functioning, so there's no breathing at all. So the clinical findings are that the brain doesn't function at all. And then there have been some reports of the registration of the electroactivity of the cortex of the brain, the EEG, which flatlines between 10 to 20 seconds. So there is no measurable electroactivity at all of the brain. And in animal studies, also the deeper structures of the brain stop functioning. Now, in this period, that there's no brain function at all, there are people who report an enhanced consciousness with the possibility of perception, emotions, cognition, memories, etc. And it should be impossible, according to our current paradigm, that consciousness is just a product of brain function. So we should discuss again how we could understand these kind of experiences. The paradoxical occurrence of enhanced consciousness during a period of an impaired brain function gives a lot of questions.